declines to release the work of ranking House Intelligence Democrat Adam Schiff. The president criticizing it as very political. Schiff firing back, saying this: Mr. President, what you call political are actually called facts.
It was totally a political act. It was disingenuous, and it was inappropriate.
Ohio mourning the loss of 2 police officers shot and killed while responding to a 911 hang-up call that a suspect is now in custody.
Officer Tony Morelli was a 20-year veteran. Officer Eric Joring was a 17-year veteran of the police force.
Both officers gave their life in protection of others. Those are true American heroes.
The Olympic sporting action on Saturday. While the focus indeed was on sports, it was also on politics. The influential sister of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with South Korean President Moon. Vice President Pan said Saturday there was no daylight between the U.S. and South Korea in their aim to rid the North of its nukes and missiles.
Free and easy down the road I go, living life like a Sunday stroll.
Free and Easy is the musical track that they chose for right now, but what they were playing in our ear moments ago was the one-hit wonder from Christopher, Lady in Red.
Oh.
Because
they were. That
Rachel
was so
Campos
sweet.
Duffy.
Lady in Red. I did it for Valentine's Day.
Beautifully adored in
up.
red.
Yeah, thank you. And Valentine's Day is coming up, so.
So we do our best for Valentine's Day on Sunday because we won't be here on Monday and Tuesday because Brian, Steve, and Ainsley will take it from there.
That's right.
But Griff, good to have you here this morning.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and boy, what a weekend of news we have, only being overshadowed by this thing happening involving athletics across the globe.
That come together, different colors.
Yeah, something like that. And the Lady in Red is a huge fan of the Olympics, as we learned yesterday.
So yesterday I said, I hate the Olympics, and I thought I was going to get a lot of Twitter reviews. You wouldn't believe how many people wrote me and said, I don't like the Olympics either. You know, I felt good because I thought I was a bad person for not liking it.
No, you're not. I've been checked out of the Olympics since Kerry Strug in 1996, since the Atlanta Olympics.
Well, you would think we would be hearing about the athletics, but instead we're not. What we're hearing about is apparently North Korea had a monarchy we didn't know about. And I'm reading today, I believe I can even quote from the headline I read at about 4 o'clock this morning. They said a high-level delegation from North Korea led by a youthful political princess. A youthful political princess is what they're calling. They are fawning over this young woman, 30 years old, certainly attractive, but my goodness, you would have thought Princess Diana is gone to the Olympics.
Good analogy. So here are some headlines of so-called mainstream press fawning over the sister of the dictator who murders people. Okay, CNN says this: Kim Jong-un's sister is stealing the show at the Winter Olympics. Washington Post, get this one. This one's the worst, in my opinion. The Ivanka Trump of North Korea captivates people in the South. Yahoo says, all swagger and smiles, Kim Jong-un's mysterious sister gets her star turn at Winter Olympics.
So interesting, because if only Ivanka could get these kind of glowing headlines from CNN and from the media. And it's also interesting that one of the tactics of the media has been you can't normalize the Trumps, right? Because that would be normalizing Republicans and by extension giving their ideas a platform to be discussed. So you can't normalize the Trumps. Here they are normalizing the sister, which, by the way, I kind of feel bad for her. Maybe she has siblings that have been murdered by her brother. Who knows if she's being forced, to be there at all. But still, you don't want to be complicit. Where are all those articles on being complicit in this dictator that, as you said, is brutal?
I normally don't come on this show. In the many weeks I've been allowed to come and sit with you guys and get really upset. But my blood's boiling because people forget. They're making the suggestion, the media, foolishly, I would say, that rapprochement on the Korean Peninsula is possible because this 30-year-old good-looking kid shows up and offers for a visit over there. We forget what this rogue regime, this brutal dictator, has done to thousands of people. And Otto Warmbier, right? Remember him? Oh, I guess we forgot all about that. I have a soundbite that we want to play from Fred Warmbier. Just take a listen and let's remember a little bit.
We have to put this in context in the spirit of the Olympics. Their athletes are not exchanging ideas with other athletes in the Olympic Village or really participating. So that's a political statement, and this is not political for me. I'm telling the truth about the regime's treatment of my son. But guess what? They do this to countless other people. This is standing up and being the voice of Otto.
Thank goodness this administration and Vice President Pence have been there to have that message. But think about the headline from the Washington Post. The Ivanka Trump of North Korea?
It's unbelievable.
So Ivanka Trump is in the White House working for, I don't know, paid leave, tax cuts. You know what I mean? This is what she's complicit in the White House. Whereas the sister of Kim Jong-un, whether she wanted to be or not, complicit in the murderous starvation regime of her brother, who suppresses her people to seek nuclear weapons to threaten the entire world. I don't know if she's happy or not. I hope she defects. She should.
I was just going to say, if I was her, I'd run away right now.
If she's smart, she'll run away. But she's surrounded by bodyguards that are probably more focused on keeping her from defecting than protecting her. That's the message we should have. But it's amazing. It's the never Trump, the hate Trump media will find every angle it can. It's unbelievable.
You get the feeling that maybe they hate Trump more than they hate North Korea and all the atrocities that are going on there. And again, it's not just that they're normalizing North Korea. They're trying to find some sort of connection, because we've heard it before from the media. Donald Trump is like, you know, a dictator.
Exactly.
And it's the most insane analogy, because if anything, this is a president who's been trying to take power away from centralized government and give it back to the people.
Absolutely.
And that's not the only thing that's upsetting me. The dueling memos, for which I covered all last week, and I'll cover all this coming week. The dueling memos, the New York Times today has a headline. Now remember, the president cannot declassify the Democrat memo because it has sensitive national security information in there.
He's decided not to because it's responsible not to.
But he can't, because why? We learn after the New York Times has a headline that President Trump won't release it, after Democrats, of course, we played yesterday, piling on the president for not releasing it. We now learn, after the headline that Trump's to blame for not releasing it, we learn in the New York Times article, and I think we've got a quote here. There's the headline, by the way. Pressure from Trump may lead to revision of the Democrat memo, pressuring for the revision. But here's the article. In a letter to the White House on Friday, top Justice Department and FBI officials said they had law enforcement or national security concerns about declassifying parts of the Democratic memo. So essentially, the FBI, the authority which determines whether or not it should be released, told him not to do it. He can't do it because of these things in there. So he sends it back, but yet he gets blamed. This is the Trump blame game, and it just is as infectious as anything at every level of
Look at the headline, but that thing that you just wrote, that quote you just wrote, was buried in the article. So it's Trump trying to stop this memo, but then you look at this and you see that it's really the FBI.
Absolutely.
And the DOJ.
You remember the Democrats yelling about the Republican memo, the Nunes memo, saying our agencies don't want to release it. The reason our agencies, FBI and DOJ, had issues with the Republican memo is because of omissions. They wanted more context in the memo. So there was nothing in the memo that was wrong. Fine, release it. We're not worried about that. In the Democrat memo, they're saying, you can't release that stuff, which is what we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
Democrats intentionally included sources and methods in their memo to make it look like President Trump is holding things back.
Right.
Very, very different. And again, the breathless attacks from Democrats are not based on anything other than a political motive, because our intelligence agencies are now saying, you can't release this because it would jeopardize our national security.
So now it goes back to the Democrats, and they have a chance to revise this?
To the committee.
To the full committee,
based on
and then go back.
recommendations from the DOJ. Exactly.
So we may see it.
So you will see the Democrat memo, but you'll see it in a responsible form, because this White House has said you should see it, just not everything that could jeopardize us.
So there's a lot of hypocrisy out there, because we know that Mark Warner, the senator, the Democrat senator,
from the Senate Intelligence Committee,
actually made contact with Russians, which is interesting because we know that, and by the way, secretly trying to make sure that it was done where nobody else could. He wanted to do it without the other members of the committee, the Republican members of the committee, finding out about it.
We reported on this yesterday. So Senator Warner reaches out to a Russian lobbyist who said he had connections to Christopher Steele. He alerted the committee 6 months later, got some defense for that. This is part of the text message exchange between Senator Warner and this lobbyist. He said, Senator Warner, we have so much to discuss. You need to be careful, but we can help our country. Waldman, the lobbyist, says, I'm in. That's one part of a longer exchange. How do I get to Christopher Steele? How do I learn about what you know about President Trump? It turns out we have videotape. It turns out people say things. Griff, you know about that?
So remember that meeting at Trump Tower? Don Jr. coming absolute attack. Mark Warner leading the charge against Don Jr. Let's look back at what Mark Warner had to say about that meeting at Trump Tower.
The president, frankly, I can't believe what he's saying. I mean, here was in black and white an email that said, hey, meet with this Russian lawyer acting as an agent of the Russian government, and this is part of the Russian government's effort to help then candidate Trump and to discredit Clinton. I don't know anybody, Democrat or Republican, that would take that kind of meeting with not only a foreign government, but a foreign adversary.
So that's last July on Special Report with Bret Baier. So there you have it. Hypocrisy is run amok in Washington. The Trump blame game is on fire, and the North Korean princess is saving apparently the world.
It's all
There may be some other headlines, Rachel, if you want to take it. I don't know, but
Trump
that's what you need to know. Good morning.
Unless we do it.
Or another cup of coffee.
I love videotape so much.
The
Thank you,
video
Senator
helps.
Warner.
The video helps.
A little bit of a different tune today. You got it, buddy.
All right, I got to take a hard turn to headlines, guys.
You got it.
So Fox News alert. Police have identified the man accused of killing 2 police officers responding to a 911 hang-up call. Quinton Smith's wife frantically calling 911 as officers Eric Joring and Anthony Morelli are gunned down in their home.
911, what's your emergency?
Please help, please help, please help.
What's wrong? Tell me what's going on.
He shot the police officers.
Your husband did it? Where's your husband now?
My daughter is in there, please.
Joring died at the scene just outside Columbus, Ohio. Morelli died in the hospital.
Both officers gave their life in protection of others. Those are true American heroes.
A makeshift memorial was set up for the fallen officers who had combined service of nearly 50 years on the force. A tour of the Grand Canyon turns deadly when a chopper crashes 600 feet to the ground, killing 3 people. Crews still rescuing 4 survivors and treating them on the scene, blaming rough terrain and strong winds from airlifting them to a nearby hospital. 7 people, including the pilot on board, taking off from Las Vegas. It's unclear what caused the fiery crash. And those are your headlines.
Tough stuff. Well, President Trump slamming the swamp over reports of a shady Russian spy scammed intel agencies out of $100 grand. But is he right to blame the swamp? We will ask former CIA analyst next.
And this officer wants you to know there are rooms available at the Green Roof Inn, but you don't want to stay there. The hilarious video now going viral.
We're working to lower that. Now let me tell you about our accommodations. We have a 1-star rating. There's no privacy in this hotel.
Welcome back. A New York Times report out yesterday, we reported on it, says a Russian spy duped U.S. intel officers out of $100,000 and offered to give up Trump's secrets and stolen NSA cyber weapons. The CIA is now calling the report patently false. Here to discuss is former CIA analyst and senior vice president for policy and programs with the Center for Security Policy, Fred Fleitz. Fred, thanks for joining us. So the story that came out yesterday is the CIA looking for cyber weapons, working with shadowy Russians, these Russians offering up information about then President Trump. The CIA says we didn't want that information. What do you make of this story and its validity?
Well, you know, it makes sense that the CIA would try to reacquire information like this and may pay a lot of money for it. But the bottom line for me is this. We have an instance of a Russian intelligence linked Russian, again trying to provide salacious anti-Trump material that's very similar to the Steele dossier, which, as we know, was funded by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. I think the question is, how can the Democrats continue to maintain this collusion narrative? How can Adam Schiff continue to say that Donald Trump is soft on the Russians, including colluding with the Russians, when we have all these reports of the Russians trying to smear and undermine Mr. Trump?
Fred, you know the agency. So if I want to take them at face value. We're looking for these cyber weapons back, and then they tried to sweeten it with dirt on President Trump. Would agents say we don't want that? Could they be seduced by that? What happens on the ground?
Well, I mean, part of this story, and this is being talked about in the news media, that there were people in the agency, careers, who wanted this information to hurt the president. But the story says that agency officers did not want this information. I hope that's true. That's very promising. The reason the president is so credible is because the agency's reputation and the reputation of the intelligence community has gone down so far in his view because they have constantly leaked against him. Yesterday there was another report on how the president receives the presidential daily brief that was completely inaccurate, as it obviously was leaked by agency officers to embarrass Mr. Trump. So I don't think Trump is prepared to give the CIA the benefit of the doubt when it comes to stories like this.
Well, and the CIA has come out slamming this New York Times report, saying this. We'll put it up on the wall. The CIA said this: the people swindled here were James Risen and Matt Rosenberg, the two authors of that New York Times piece. The fictional story that CIA was built out of $100,000 is patently false. So you want to believe the CIA, but at the same time, you've acknowledged the CIA will pay for secrets or pay for information. In this case, would it be unlikely that they would pay for the first piece of information, and then once they don't get it, they cut it off?
I read that story and a similar story by The Intercept. And look, I want to believe the agency. I worked there for 19 years, but I thought the New York Times and the Intercept story sounded plausible. There's another angle here. Why was this leaked in the first place? Who leaked it? And I think the people who leaked it are people within the agency who resent the fact that CIA Director Pompeo reportedly has an off-the-books channel with the Russians. This is in the New York Times piece. And they don't like that because it denies them access to information I'm afraid that they would like to leak.
Fred, are you concerned, briefly, are you concerned at all that FBI, CIA, NSA, any agents of our government still today would be looking for information on a sitting president, President Trump?
I'm worried that that's going on. I'm encouraged with Director Pompeo at CIA. I think he's going to stop that from happening. This is why we need strong leadership at the top of these agencies to make sure that these agents keep politics out of their work and they do the work of the American people.
Boy, that's what we all hope for. Fred Fleitz, thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Good to be here.
All right. Well, a Fox News alert. 1 in 10 deaths in this country last week were because of the flu, and the outbreak showing no signs of slowing down. So how worried should you be? We're bringing that to you next. Plus, the media gushing over Kim Jong-un's sister at the Winter Olympics. All she did was show up and smile. Why are they glamorizing the Hermit Kingdom, that rogue nation? Governor Mike Huckabee here with a reality check about that country coming up.
Welcome back. Some quick headlines. A security scare overnight at LAX airport. A shirtless man temporarily shutting down runways after scaling a fence and running up to a Southwest plane preparing for takeoff, then stealing a fire extinguisher out of its wheel well. Police arresting the unidentified man who may have been mentally ill. The airport now back to normal operations. And the disgraced former USA Gymnastics team doctor convicted of sexually abusing underage girls has been transferred to a high-security federal prison. Larry Nassar starting his 60-year sentence in Tucson, Arizona at a facility specializing in treating sex offenders. Rachel?
Thank you, Griff. This is a Fox News alert. This season's nationwide deadly flu outbreak could be the worst on record. 1 in 10 Americans are dying from the flu with no signs of stopping. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention has reported 63 deaths from pneumonia or influenza among children this season alone. So how worried should we be? Joining us now to discuss is radiologist Dr. Nicole Saphier. Thank you, Dr. Saphier, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This sounds really scary. I mean, it's 1 in every 10 deaths last week. Should we be scared?
So those statistics are terrifying, and the truth is they're all true. However, I want to be honest and say that we are on par with some of our other seasons. We have influenza-like diseases or diagnoses right now which are mapping where it was with the swine flu epidemic in 2009, 2010. The thing that's a little bit scary is, though, we're going to exceed the deaths from the swine flu is what the projections are right now. So that concerns me. The amount of people who are being diagnosed with the flu isn't necessarily more than we've seen in the past. So the concern is, why are people dying from the flu? And it's not necessarily just the diagnosis from the flu. When you have the flu, it releases chemicals into your system, and that causes inflammation, which can cause pneumonia, sepsis, and we've now found heart attacks. People actually dying from heart attacks from the flu.
Right. That actually makes a lot of sense. So what can we do to slow down this rate? I mean, you're saying we're on par, we're going to exceed the number from last year probably. Can that be slowed down, and what can we do as patients to make that happen?
So the good news is the far majority of adults and children who get the flu are going to recover completely. They're going to be just fine. However, stay home. Stay home from school. Stay home from work. Don't go to the store. If you have the flu, and a great way to tell the difference between a cold and a flu is high fevers and chills. And the flu tends to come on much faster than a cold, which is a little bit more gradual. If you have signs of the flu, only leave your house to go and get medical treatment. The sooner you get medical treatment, you can start on some medications. The sooner you recognize you have the flu, the sooner you're going to get better. Now, the one thing I encourage everyone to keep an eye out for is the child or the adult who has the flu, and then they start getting better, and then all of a sudden they're sick again. That could mean they have a super infection, which means a bacteria has potentially come in. That's when people are dying. If that happens to you, seek medical treatment immediately.
So what's the point where, I mean, I have kids at the house. What point do I need to go to the doctor?
If you have young children under the age of 5 or any of them that have chronic conditions, asthma, bad allergies, or really anything else, you should always go see the physician if you think they may have the flu. Don't try and keep them at home. But for the other kids who, really just have fever, chills that you can manage, they're still eating and drinking normally, they're still using the restroom normally, give them a week. They're probably going to get better, but make sure you're cleaning everything and getting rid of everything in the house that they've touched.
I just have to push back a little bit because we're hearing the stories. I know you said the stories sound, are maybe more scary than they actually are, but we're hearing people, their kid gets sick, and then like 2 days later, they're dead. So, I mean, it kind of confuses me. Like, you're saying wait a week to go to the doctor. I mean...
Oh, no. I'm absolutely not saying wait a week to go to the doctor. Okay. No. If your child has a flu and it's not having a complicated course, then for the majority of them, they're going to get better. What I'm saying is some children are getting better, and then they get sick again. And then people are thinking, oh, they just got a relapse of the flu. That getting sick again can be an emergency. That's when they need to go. But the far majority of children should just go see a doctor. It's good to have the diagnosis, get swabbed. But that's the only time they should be leaving the house. They shouldn't be going to their activities.
Too late to get the flu shot?
Absolutely not. The worst is yet to come.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Very, very helpful for a lot of parents who are home watching. So thank you. Tensions flaring in the Middle East, Israel and Syria. One step closer to confrontation after an Israeli fighter jet is shot down. And Governor Huckabee is in Jerusalem right now. We'll get his take on the situation. And they may be friends in Sex and the City, but Kim Cattrall and Sarah Jessica Parker have some bad blood between them in real life. We're going to explain coming up.
Korean president.
South Korea's president sharing with her this historic handshake.
This groundbreaking moment, Kim Jong-un extending an invitation presented by his sister to South Korean President Moon Jae-in.
Well, we're going to bring in former governor of Arkansas, Fox News contributor, and former GOP presidential candidate Mike Huckabee, who happens to be in Jerusalem this morning. Sir, thank you very much for being here. Before we get to topics of Israel, which are top of news as well, I have to ask you about the fawning of the media over Kim Jong-un's sister. She's a political princess, Governor. Why would we bend over backwards to characterize her as such?
It's the narrative the media must want to paint. But look, the little sister of little Kim still comes from a country where most of the people are starving to death, where repression is extraordinary, and where they kill visitors like they did with the gentleman Warmbier. I mean, that's the sad thing. They haven't changed their ways. They're still an incredibly dangerous country that threatens the peace of the world, and having the sister show up and pretend that she's all fun and games doesn't change a thing in North Korea.
Governor, they actually, in the media cover, compared her to Ivanka Trump. And you have a daughter, by the way, who's also complicit in the Trump administration. I mean, how do you feel about this kind of coverage? It's really unbelievable that they're trying to normalize this dictatorship's family.
Well, having watched the news coverage of the Trump administration for the last year, nothing surprises me anymore about the way the media portrays not just this White House, but portrays everything else on the globe. I mean, they pretend that good is bad and bad is good, and most of the time they can't tell the difference. But most people in the world can, and nobody's fooled by the theatrics of North Korea and them pretending to be normal. They're anything but normal. They're still the hermit kingdom. They're still dangerous. They still pose a threat to the world, and they still have no business getting close to a nuclear weapon.
Governor, let me ask you, Israel and Iran, closer to confrontation. We saw what happened yesterday. You're on the ground. Bring us up to speed of what you see there.
Well, I think a lot of people will say, boy, it's really tense there. And certainly there's some tension because of what happened yesterday. But the one message that became very clear was Israel, I think, said about as perfectly as they can, if you try to get into our territory, we're going to hit you, and we're going to hit you hard. And there's several holes in the landscape of Syria today that are the reminders of the 12 strikes that the Israelis inflicted upon that launch site and some other sites as well. Let's not kid ourselves. The reason that this president and others need to be concerned about the Iranian deal was shown yesterday. The Iranians are not good people, and they have no intention of becoming good people. They're like the North Koreans. They only have one thing in mind, and that's to inflict as much carnage as possible. But what the Israelis did yesterday, honestly, will bring a calm, most likely, to the Golan Heights and to this country for the next several days. And it was very important that both the White House and the State Department issued strong statements of support for Israel to protect itself. But Israel did the right thing yesterday by saying, you come at us with a knife, we come at you with a gun. You put somebody in a hospital, we put somebody in the morgue. The only way to deal with these bullies from Iran is to hit them hard.
Absolutely, Governor. You're in Jerusalem. I'll actually be there next week. You're a great friend of Israel. So what happened was an Iranian drone came into Israeli space. They dealt with it. Then there was an attack on an Israeli fighter jet, which was shot down in Syrian airspace by Iranian-backed groups. I mean, does this escalate? Could this escalate inside that region? It ultimately is a confrontation between Israel and Iran, which, as you said, has implications for the United States.
Well, it certainly could, and the two pilots of the F-16 both survived. One of them seriously injured, the other one not so seriously injured. They both ejected. The plane ended up crash landing into Israeli territory, so that's good. But the Russians have already said to the Syrians, back down, don't escalate this. The U.S. is clearly standing with Israel. I don't see what could be possibly gained if there was any escalation on the part of either the Syrians or the Iranians. It would be a fool's errand to do. So let's hope that what they attempted